Welcome again to Sport Unlocked, but with a depleted squad.
Yep, wherever you are, Martyn Ziegler, happy Easter. We're still rolling.
Yeah, Tariq Panja from the New York Times and myself, Rob Harris from Sky News. And you can now watch us and follow us, listen to us in a lot more places. Updates now on our Sport Unlocked LinkedIn page and on YouTube if you go at Sport Unlocked on YouTube.
Yeah, I've even tried to comb my hair this time, Rob.
Yeah, it's the way to keep up with. Perhaps Gianni Infantino all round on social media has still been across the US pushing those Club World Cup tickets.
I don't think that's possible. We could try our best, but holding on to those coattails of the King of Soccer.
Yeah, but what will be happening to the World Cup in 2026? Because things are building up to the FIFA Congress in Paraguay in May, and the big talking point, will the World Cup be expanding yet again in the men's game to 64 teams, that proposal coming in from Paraguay, but it's not had a good reception, has it?
It really hasn't. And just to go back, this was this proposal that just appeared randomly at the FIFA Council meeting from the Uruguayan delegate. But clearly, this seems to have been the plan of the CONMEBOL president, Alejandro Dominguez. And he's actually now come out backing it fully fervently with comments about this is such a special event. 64 teams to celebrate the centenary of the World Cup. And Rob, the reactions, starting from the UEFA president in Belgrade a couple of weeks ago at the Congress there, haven't been positive at all. Who else have we heard from?
Well, Alexander Sheffrin called it a bad idea. Victor Montagliani, the CONCACAF president, his region hosting this Canada, US, Mexico World Cup, saying he doesn't believe it's the right move for the tournament itself, the broader football ecosystem, and for the leagues and the players, talking to ESPN, making the point that we haven't even had the first 48 team on. This is meant to be the first with 48, so it's not the right time to jump to 64, saying it shouldn't even be on the table. And before then, we'd had the Asian Football Confederation Congress, where Sheikh Salman said that if the issue remains open to change, someone might come along and demand raising the number to 132 teams. Where would we end up then? It would be chaos.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's plenty of chaos in football at the moment, and we talked about on previous pods about what issues this will raise. But why does Alejandro Dominguez want this? I was talking to people in South America this week. Yes, there is a centenary, but one of the suggestions is this: when the 2030 World Cup was announced, which included these three South American teams, Paraguay, Uruguay, and Argentina, with the main hosts Morocco, Spain, and Portugal. The idea that Paraguay had somehow shoehorned itself into this upset a few people in South America because, yes, it's the home of CONMEBOL, South America's football governing body, but it had nothing to do with the centenary, the 1930 World Cup. So what they're saying is, not only does Paraguay get a hosting, that one game of hosting the World Cup in 2030, but more importantly, hang on a minute, you've somehow managed to get automatic qualification to the World Cup. So if you're like, I don't know, Chile, Peru, other countries, Colombia, even Brazil, you think, hang on, you've just sorted yourself out. And I think this was at some way an effort to assuage some of that
South American politics at play, and it's probably notable there hasn't even been a hint of Gianni Infantino vaguely even backing 64 teams.
Well, not publicly at all, but there hasn't been a hint of him also not slamming 64 teams as well. However, it'll be interesting. We've got the next FIFA Congress is actually in Paraguay next month. So this might be one of the few places where Gianni Infantino might do a press conference. Of course, he didn't do one in Bangkok last year. The first time, I think, in modern times, a FIFA president hasn't done one. But it's one of the questions asked. Would you favour a 64-team World Cup, Gianni?
Well, he has been doing a lot of media across the US, and each of the cities he's gone to, some sort of mixed zone, some local TV interviews as well. He's got to really push that message. But he wasn't at the AFC Congress. Normally, we would expect to see him at these regional meetings.
Yes, he was in Belgrade for the UEFA one, for example, quite recently. But he was double booked. He was at not the AFC, Rob, but the UFC.
Yeah, in Miami there with Donald Trump.
With Donald Trump and, a bunch of who's who in terms of the Trump orbit and the people around. UFC, this mixed martial arts sport, I can't say I'm a particular fan of this sport, but it's growing. It's popular among particularly young men. Has become a kind of, if you want to meet Donald Trump and his inner circle, where do you head? You can go to Mar-a-Lago, maybe go to the White House if you're invited there, or show up at a UFC event in Miami, and you might get an audience. And it was there where Gianni Infantino, I think, met Kash Patel, the FBI director, the first time, but he's met him again since.
Yeah, met him again in Washington, D.C., and certainly something FIFA are trying to highlight and emphasise, and pointing out how much FIFA has changed. Now it's the FBI director coming to meet FIFA, having cordial talks, exchanging plans for the World Cups, rather than what happened 10 years ago with the FBI leading the criminal case against so many football officials, leading to those raids in Zurich.
It's a different world now, isn't it? And if you think about the priorities for the US government, the view on maybe white collar corruption has changed as well. If you look at some of the policies, Kash Patel is quite interesting from a footballing point of view as well. The most recent meeting, I think it was in Washington. There was another one, I think, at FIFA's headquarters in Miami. He was wearing, not in the most recent one, but in the previous one, a red and white striped tie. And if you look closely, it had the Liverpool Football Club insignia there. So, Liverpool fans, if you're listening or now watching this on YouTube, do let us know what you think of that.
Showing his football credentials. This week also, Gianni Infantino with the Secretary of State for Transportation and American Airlines announced as a domestic sponsor of the World Cup. Of course, Qatar Airways, the global one, and air transportation, the key way of moving around that World Cup in North America.
Yeah, exactly. This is going to be, it's immense, isn't it? The spaces you're going to have to cover. And it makes sense this is the deal because Qatar Airways doesn't have domestic routes within the US. It's probably a deal there done between not only FIFA and American Airlines, but Qatar Airways as well, allowing this to happen because they are the global partner of FIFA. We talked about the Club World Cup. We're still waiting for this decision in who the 32nd team at the Club World Cup is. Of course, this hinges around Leon, a team from Mexico, being removed by FIFA because of multi-club ownership rules, and their sister club, Pachuca, being in the competition as well. So FIFA saying only one of these can go in. Leon have been removed, and they're taking their case to the Court of Arbitration for Sport. That should be heard very soon. In the meantime, FIFA has said what they want is a playoff between the team that Leon beat in the final of the CONCACAF Champions League, which is LAFC from Los Angeles, and Club America of Mexico, which is the biggest football team in Mexico with millions and millions of supporters and likely to send thousands of fans to fill those empty seats at the Club World Cup. While we're waiting, there's been a lot of consternation saying why Club America should be involved. FIFA has a limit of 2 teams per country, unless it's a champion. Club America never made it to a final. They're only in this because of an issue that they are high on the coefficients. They performed well, but that a lot of people saying they shouldn't be in there. And Gianni Infantino, he was pushing forward this idea of this playoff game publicly. That's led to a furious outburst from the Leon coach.
Eduardo Bariza saying, I won't discover anything describing the leaders of an organisation that's totally under suspicion of irregularities. I thought they were, that's referring to Infantino's comments on the replacement clubs, reckless, unnecessary and convenient. FIFA's president can't express himself on possible replacements without waiting for CAS's ruling. His words carry a lot of weight. So, certainly questions there about FIFA, and obviously questions about some of the qualification process in North America, given Inter Miami's entry into the tournament. Some news of one of Gianni Infantino's former advisors, Zvonimir Boban. He was Deputy General Secretary for a time, then went across to UEFA as Chief of Football. before quite a falling out with Alexander Sheffrin about a year ago.
Zvonimir Boban had those senior roles both at FIFA and UEFA, and he did, fell out with Alexander Sheffrin. If you remember, this was last year when he had heard of these efforts to roll back the term limit statutes at UEFA, which successfully went through, which would allow Alexander Sheffrin to run, if he wanted, for another term beyond the 12-year cap. Boban quit quite loudly. That was a very big story at the time. Sheffrin, of course, said he planned to keep to his word and stand down at the end of his current term, which is this one. Asked most recently, he said if that was still his plan, he said now is not the time to talk about that. So potentially some rollback there, we'll see. But yes, Zvonimir Boban is now the chief executive of the Croatian club Dinamo Zagreb, where he was a former player, where he came of age as a football player, and where he made extremely big news.
Yeah, former captain, and against Red Star Belgrade, there were clashes in the stadium. This is May 1990, and he was protecting supporters by launching a high kick at a police officer, as Graham Dunbar from AP noted this week. The incident revealed growing ethnic tensions that led to war across the Balkans for the next decade, and Boban was then suspended from the Yugoslavia squad that went to the 1990 World Cup
Look,
in
this
Italy.
was at that moment, a really febrile atmosphere in the former Yugoslavia. As you said, it sort of preceded this horrible series of wars in the Balkans. But if you talk to Boban about this, it's not something he's especially proud of, or he doesn't make a big scene, a big deal about it. But it was in the moment and has been talked about as a major moment, a symbolic moment of that conflict. But it's not something that he himself is someone who said, like, I'm really proud of kicking the policeman or anything. It was just something that happened in the moment, and he's obviously asked about it all the time. And I always find it interesting that he's not someone who kind of makes hay with this or adds it as a part of his personal. We live in a world of personal branding these days, I suppose, and he doesn't. He's quite low key about it.
Yeah, it was Dinamo themselves in the announcement who said that Boban's actions then are symbolically considered to be the beginning of the struggle for Croatian independence. They did highlight it in the announcement, but yes, during his time at FIFA and UEFA, he wasn't dropping it into interviews. We hear so often when we're interviewing sports leaders, they might drop in the same anecdote, use something from their lives constantly to accentuate it, but actually would keep that very much often in the past. Although he would conversationally talk about the 1990s a bit when just around him, and it would come up in conversation, although probably more likely to talk about his media career as a CEO at times as well.
Of a newspaper, that if he didn't like what you wrote, said, yes, I own a newspaper, so I know what you guys do. But yeah, no, it's interesting, and it's kind of, in a way, it's not the way he saw his career going, I suppose, if you're looking at the roles at FIFA and UEFA. But in a way, it's great for football that you have this story of Zvonimir Boban, in a way, coming home and trying to do well for Dinamo Zagreb, who in the league this season, they've been struggling. They were in the Champions League this season in the league phase and got to that very last week of the campaign with still a hope of reaching the playoffs. They beat another one of his former teams, AC Milan, but it wasn't enough to get through to the knockouts. But it's been difficult in terms of their context because they're serial winners in Croatia this season. It looks like they won't win the league.
Yeah, we'll see how things are there when he starts at Dinamo Zagreb officially in June. Well, across to Spain, and a couple of concerning reports there. What is about the rise in anti-Muslim hate speech being targeted at players, particularly during Ramadan?
Yeah, and I think this is just might be part of a trend towards a few things. We've got this anti-immigration kind of feeling across Europe. A lot of the migrants are Muslim. There's been this tendency of, certainly on social media, of anti-Muslim commentary, which has been growing. And then, of course, football is not an island. So this was a report that was published by the Spanish Ministry of Inclusion, Social Security and Migration. and it was published in Mundo Deportivo. It said there's been a 5% increase of racist attacks directed against football players like Lamine Yamal, the prodigy at Barcelona, and Brahim Diaz, who plays for Real Madrid during Ramadan. It said the Spanish Observatory on Racism and Xenophobia recorded a significant increase in religious-related hate speech as a result of Ramadan. And do you know what? I want to say I'm surprised by this, but given where we are with social media and the general kind of hateful language, this is where we are, isn't it?
It is. I mean, it references explicit aggressive language that is used to target them. Some suggestions they should be expelled from the national team and the country. Interestingly, in the last week or so, I saw that perhaps one of the most prominent football transfer influencers, Fabrizio Romano, was actually in Italy with the head of Instagram. That would be the moment to raise the abuse that footballers are facing on Instagram. Maybe he did, but it wasn't mentioned in any of these posts.
This is a guy. It's going to be those bits of transfer news and generally positive commentary, whether it's around FIFA Club World Cups, whether it's around Instagram. This is the model. And funny you should mention that. The Spanish ministry in its report there, it said that neither X nor YouTube have removed any of the content reported in this, any of this hate speech. A colleague of mine, Ryan Mack, who is a very big Arsenal fan, he was very disappointed. He said Instagram also visited the Emirates stadium and was having a promotion there
with a football freestyler.
So, but this is a platform that's owned by Facebook as well, and we all remember the awful commentary after Bukayo Saka missed a penalty for England, as well as Marcus Rashford and Jadon Sancho, 3 black players missing those penalties and subject to just this obscene racial abuse, streams of this stuff, and the platform's doing very little to do that. So he put that, he said that was his first story. He and I worked on it together when he joined the New York Times. It's funny to see Arsenal giving Instagram such a great welcome to their stadium.
Obviously, the challenge is being that these messages are very often in direct messages. So how you instigate an algorithm that picks up those DMs and they're not publicly seen, and obviously even more painful, the fact that they're landing in the direct inboxes of the players, or they're having to decide not to look at the messages, so you can't have that engagement with the fans, with the audience. But yeah, there we saw him on Instagram, his platform, Adam Mashiri meeting a football freestyler at the Emirates. You've got to hope someone high up at Arsenal so. Went down to have a word.
The thing here is that it comes at a moment where Facebook, which owns Instagram, Meta, which owns Facebook and Instagram, has decided to roll back on any forms of moderation, hasn't it? In light of Donald Trump being inaugurated as the president of the United States once again, Mark Zuckerberg, the owner of Meta, went and online to tell the world that, yep, no more moderation. It's going to be along the lines of X now, where you have what do you call it? The subscribers who decide put community notes, I think it's called, right? If there's an untruth. So a rollback on these policies rather than actually trying to tackle them from the top. And you say it's really hard, but these companies are worth absolutely enormous sums of money, billions of dollars in profits. Surely it's not beyond them to actually tackle this properly if they wanted to.
And to make it a priority, and for the conversation not just to exist when there's been a high-profile incident and then the world reacts, but then moves on. And that moves us on to a different area, but perhaps why some things get less attention than other stories. And it's the Spanish women's football. Of course, we've talked about quite a bit in the last 2 years since the Women's World Cup final and the eventual sexual assault conviction for the former head of the Spanish FA, Luis Rubiales, and his ban from football. Well, this is a very different incident in women's football. It's the Barcelona defender, Mapi Leon. An incident happened in February when she was accused of inappropriately touching her Espanyol rival, Daniela Caracas. We finally had the verdict in from Ligue F, and just a 2-match ban for violating Caracas's intimacy. It does appear lenient.
It does, because just take this outside of the football context, if you want, for a second. If you were to do something like that outside of a football stadium, it's fairly likely the police will be involved if you touch someone where you're not supposed to touch them. And this is a gross violation of her opponent's body, effectively. A 2-game ban seems unbelievably lenient in that context. And the problem is, when you have these, you get a 2-game ban, but there isn't that much commentary from, say, Ligue F or the Spanish Federation as to why it would warrant a 2-game ban. Is this the same as a bad tackle, an angry word? We don't know. But as described, it's quite a horrific thing to do, and then to get such a lenient ban, and you do wonder why.
It seems, certainly, in terms of the stories that have travelled, there's more outrage over Kylian Mbappe only receiving a 1-match ban for a red card for violent conduct in La Liga, which usually would have been a 3-match ban for that dismissal, and it enables him to be back in time for the Copa del Rey final
in that
against
context.
Barcelona.
If you describe it like that, people who aren't fans of Kylian Mbappe or Real Madrid, or people who want the rules followed, they'll see it as maybe power. One rule for the big teams, the big players, in order to have them in these big games, one for someone else. And maybe in the Mapi Leon scenario as well, she's not playing for a small team. She's playing for Barcelona, who seem to win and win and win and win when it comes to women's football. She's a member of that Spanish World Cup winning squad not so long ago, one of the biggest female players in the world, not just in Spain. Is there differing treatment? But also, just on that, you think, what a thing to do. You rarely have seen instances of a case like that. Looking back, to our childhood here, there was the incident which was captured on camera, and at that time, different era, different reactions, was Vinnie Jones when he was playing for Wimbledon, and Paul Gascoigne at Newcastle. And there's a famous photo about what he did. If that happened today, God, it'd be fire and brimstone, wouldn't it? It wouldn't be a 2-game ban.
Yeah, then it was glorified as an iconic image, but a very different era. Now, as for Leon herself, she did say it was not her intention to infringe upon the intimacy of a fellow professional. A statement at the time from February says, as the images show, it was part of a playing action in which she deliberately touches me and I touch her leg, saying, in reaction to the clash, what's up with you? There is no contact with her private parts and certainly no intention. There are, though, accusations against Leon of transphobic.
Yeah, that was also part of the
commentary.
That would be an aggravating circumstance if this needed any more aggravation. If the league has deemed that she has touched her private parts, if this language has been deemed to have been part of that action, it kind of aggravates it to a level which surely is not a 2-game ban.
Because FIFA has a 5-game minimum ban for discriminatory behaviour. Well, at the time, there was a column by Susie Rack saying the incident shows women's football needs to protect its players. And it talks about the horrific online abuse faced by Caracas, but less focus on this incident this week. But also it might be telling us a bit about the dominance of English football around the world. If things happen in England, they can dominate a lot more as well. So if what was happening in the French men's league was in England, it certainly perhaps be talked about a lot because...
Now, this is the DAZN television contract with Ligue 1, which a couple of years ago lost its billion euro agreement with Media Pro and has been kind of descending and spiraling since then. This was for less than half of that, less than 500 million euros per season, I think, with DAZN. And I think within a few months, the whole thing started to crumble. They've been in arbitration talks with DAZN asking to pay less for these rights, citing poor ratings and also issues around piracy, and the league saying, look, no, this isn't happening. You've signed a contract, and now it looks like the whole thing is going to unravel. And it brings to mind the fact that some of the owners at the time said we shouldn't go with DAZN at all. I think this was Joseph Orguillon from Lens and John Texter, who's with Leon, saying maybe it's time for League One to launch its own product. That didn't happen. No saying it will work, but my goodness, chaos and financial issues surely for all these teams that rely on this money.
Really stemming from when the French league sold the rights in 2020 to MediaPro for 814 million a year.
Yeah. So
and then MediaPro
this
pulled the
has
plug
been going, and also
5
you've
months
got
into that
issues
4-year deal.
That led to bad blood with, really the most important broadcaster in France, the one that has helped the league all these decades, is Canal Plus. That deal with MediaPro really broke that relationship. And of course, beIN Sports, the Qatari-owned company, which is presided over by Nasser Al Khelaifi, who's the PSG president, of course, has been in the mix there as well. This is a series of blunders that I think is going to relegate the French Football League to well outside of. We talk about these big 5 leagues in Europe with the Premier League way at the top. It's very hard to see the French Football League bouncing back from this in a meaningful way. It does make you wonder, though, if you're Paris Saint-Germain, how are you balancing your books when all these TV rights keep collapsing? They've still got this incredible team. They could win the Champions League this season. If you ask me as a viewer, they've been one of the best teams to watch. They look the most well-packed team. Yes, they've lost these big stars, but they've not been buying players. They've spent a huge amount of money on putting this fantastic team together. Will they be able to do that and balance the books with the domestic rights worth such a poor amount, almost nothing at the moment?
Fortunately for them, they're in the Club World Cup, so they've got the FIFA win
via
DAZN.
So the top European team, what was it? Could
via
get up to
Saudi
125 million if they win that. Now, if you're PSG, that money would come at a very, very opportune time.
So the question is, who will step in to get those rights in the French league? MediaPro, a Spanish company, they withdrew. Now DAZN not wanting to keep their deal going on, being obviously with the links to Nasser Al Khelaifi, but do Canal Plus come back in? And where is the league, and particularly internationally, squeezed out by the Premier League and La Liga? What a week it has been for sport. It did start, because it was the early hours of Monday morning UK time, with Rory McIlroy winning the Masters at Augusta. The first time he'd won it, completing a Grand Slam, the first for a European man.
He finally ending this curse of 15 years where he should have won it 15 years ago. Looking well on course to doing it, screwing it up, winning it again, screwing it up again, and then finally ending that wait. It was fantastic television. It comes actually just a week before the 40th anniversary of the World Championship snooker final in the UK, Dennis Taylor versus Steve Davis. That final also ended after midnight, and if you would believe this, for younger listeners will find this very hard to believe, but I think about 18 million people in Britain were watching BBC Two after midnight to watch that final frame that hinged on this black that almost no one wanted to pop, and Dennis Taylor finally did, and he's got this famous scene of him wagging his finger at I think a pod listener at Trevor East, former ITV and Sky TV executive who was in the crowd that day. Anyway, I digress. Incredible scenes for Rory McIlroy there, and the numbers, Rob. Looking at a press release after that Sunday final round there at Augusta, 1.3 million viewers on average Sky had on Sunday. And a lot of those for McIlroy, and many of those staying up after midnight. Incredible market share for what is a pay TV channel. Just tells you the power of sports, doesn't it?
Yeah, live events still capturing people and discussing the ins and outs of sports news as well. getting an audience as well. And as ever, you can follow us, message us on every social media platform. You find us on Blue Sky, X, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn, and we have the WhatsApp channel as well, where you can get various updates as well. And of course, you can email us, sport.pod@gmail.com. As ever, thank you for listening. Goodbye for now.